Robinson Crusoe was born in 1632 in York, in England. He worked hard at school. His parents wanted him to find a good job, but he wanted to go to sea and become a sailor. When he was 18, he went to London and found a ship which was sailing to a country in West Africa called Guinea. He bought some goods which he wanted to sell in Guinea and got on the ship. A short time later, the ship left London. During the long voyage, Crusoe became a good sailor. When the ship arrived in Guinea, he sold his goods and he went back to London with a lot of money. In London, Crusoe bought more goods to sell, and he sailed towards Guinea again. When they were sailing towards Africa, some pirates took the ship. The pirates took Crusoe and the other sailors to Morocco and sold them as slaves. After 2 years, Crusoe was very unhappy, and he wanted to escape. One day, he took a small fishing boat. He put some food and water in the boat, and he sailed out to sea. After some days in the small boat, a ship sailed by, and the captain of the ship rescued Crusoe. The captain was a kind man, and his ship took Crusoe to Brazil, where he became a farmer and lived happily. After a few years, Crusoe wanted to be a trader again, and in 1659 he sailed with some friends to Guinea to sell more goods. During their voyage, the ship sailed into a big storm. The storm became worse, and finally, the ship started to sink. All the sailors were thrown into the sea. The next morning, Crusoe woke up on a beach, but he couldn't see any of his friends, only the ship's 2 cats. There was nobody from the ship with him. He looked around the beach, and he found a small river where he could wash and drink some water. That first night, he slept in a big tree so that he was safe from dangerous animals or people. The next morning, Crusoe decided to swim back to the ship before it sank. He found some boxes of rice, cheese, and meat. He looked for his friends, but there was nobody on the ship. He built a small raft, and during the next few days, he went back to the ship many times to collect food, tools, guns, knives, and rope. That night, there was another storm, and the ship sank. Crusoe spent the next few months building a strong fort where he could live. He made a table and chairs, and one day he found some goats. He had a lot of things from the ship which were useful. He had a small telescope, a compass, some books, pens, ink, and paper. He decided to write a diary every day. When he walked around the island, he found a beautiful valley. In the valley, there were orange and lemon trees and melons. It was beautiful, and he decided to build a second house there. One day, he caught a parrot. He taught it to say some words. This made him very happy. In the next few months, he made some pots for cooking and keeping his food. He had meat from the goats, and he used his rice to grow more rice. After 3 years on the island, he decided to build a boat. He cut down a very large tree, and he spent 4 months building a big boat. But he couldn't push the boat to the beach because it was too big. In the next few years, Crusoe learned to make clothes from animal skins, and he built a smaller boat which he used to sail around the island. He caught some more goats, and he made cheese from their milk. His life was good now. Then one day, while he was walking along the beach, he saw a man's footprint. He was very afraid, and he ran back to his fort. He stayed there for 3 days and made his fort stronger. A few days later, he saw a fire on the beach and a man's bones. The men who were visiting the island were really dangerous. After Crusoe found the footprint on the beach, he did not feel safe. He was worried about the dangerous men, but they didn't come back to the island. For the next few years, Crusoe lived quietly. He had a lot of food, he worked hard, and he wrote his diary at night. One day, 22 years after he arrived on the island, Crusoe saw the dangerous men again. He was really afraid, but the men quickly left the island. A year later, while he was walking on a hill, he heard some guns. He ran to the top of the hill. With his telescope, he saw a large Spanish ship, which was slowly sinking into the sea. Crusoe sailed to the ship in his small boat, but there was nobody on the ship. He found some useful cooking pots, clothes, and a bag of gold and silver coins. A year and a half later, Crusoe saw 5 small boats on the beach and some dangerous men. These men had a prisoner with them, but the prisoner escaped and ran up the beach. Crusoe quickly rescued the man. The man who Crusoe saved wanted to be his slave. But Crusoe didn't want a slave. He wanted a friend. He took the man to his house in the valley and called him Friday, because that was the day when he rescued him. Crusoe was really happy to have a friend, and he taught Friday to speak English. They spent the next 3 years very happily on the island. They told stories, talked, and laughed a lot. One day, Friday ran back to the fort because he saw the dangerous men on the beach again. They had a prisoner with them, so Crusoe and Friday thought of a plan and rescued the prisoner. He was a Spanish sailor. Then Crusoe and Friday discovered a second prisoner on the beach. It was a very big surprise, because the man was Friday's father. Friday was really happy, and he danced and laughed loudly. The 4 men went back to Crusoe's fort, where they ate some food and rested. The 4 men became good friends, and they lived happily on the island. One day, Crusoe was surprised to see an English ship. A small boat sailed to the island, and some sailors brought 3 prisoners from the ship. Crusoe watched the men and learned that the 3 prisoners were also sailors from the ship. One of the men was the ship's captain, who was with 2 friends. The people who took them to the island were mutineers, and now they were looking around the island. Crusoe and Friday were brave, and they rescued the English captain and his 2 friends. Then they captured the mutineers, and they took back the English ship. The English captain wanted to thank Crusoe for his help. He made a special meal, and then he gave Crusoe his ship. Crusoe was really happy. He didn't want to hurt the mutineers, so he let them stay on the island. On the 19th of December, 1686, Crusoe left the island and sailed back to England with Friday and the ship's captain. When Crusoe returned to England, he married and had 3 children. Sadly, 8 years later, his wife died, and he decided to visit his island again. He stayed there for 3 weeks, and he helped the people who were living there. Crusoe felt sad when he left the island. When he returned to England, he found it difficult to be happy. And after a few years, he decided to go to sea again and work as a trader. He wanted to use his experience to help other sailors when they travelled through dangerous seas.